Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today B'Yetz Hashem Daf Hey Amid Aleph. We're continuing to learn Hilchos Chol HaMoed. We pick up today on the very bottom line of Daled Amid Beis, Siman Tov Kuf Lamed Gimel, in the midst of Sif Daled. So, here in Sif Daled, the Mechaber told us that you are allowed to go fishing on Chol HaMoed. You could go ahead and you could trap as much fish as you want. You could salt as much fish as you want. You're doing this l'tzarech hamoed. The chiddush over here is that you don't have to only fish for a reasonable amount of fish that you're going to use on the moed. You can fish for as much fish as you want. And the same thing, you don't have to only salt a limited amount. You could salt whatever you want. And we explained the reason is because each fish that you catch might be better than the previous fish that you caught, and you never know what you're going to catch. You're going to catch something better, and that would be a greater covet for the moed. And also with the salting fish is not like salting of and preserving fruits that we learned about earlier, where once you start the salting process, the fruits become not roy la'achila. By fish, even when you salt them, you could always squeeze them out, the Mechaber said, and they become edible once again, and therefore there's always a chance that you're going to partake of these fish on Yom Tov, and therefore all of the fishing and all of the salting is all considered tzarech hamoed, and you're allowed to do this on Chol HaMoed. We mentioned yesterday from Rav Moshe Zechet Tzadik Livracha that you're allowed to go fishing for enjoyment as well. Now we pick up with the words of the Ramah on the bottom line of Daled Amid Beis. Says the Ramah, Umutar l'tzudan b'farhesia. You're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to do this fishing and trap the fish even publicly. Shenikar l'koil shehu l'tzarech hamoed. There is no problem here of a marasayan because everybody will realize that you're fishing l'tzarech hamoed. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here and explain this a little bit better. Bottom line, Daled Amid Beis, says the Mishnah Berurah Nice Cut and Chaf, Umutar l'tzudan b'farhesia shenikar v'chulai. You're allowed to do this fishing and trapping of fish even very publicly because everybody will understand that you're doing it l'tzarech hamoed. It's recognizable, it's nicker, that it's l'tzarech hamoed. Says the Chavetz Chaim, U'kemoisha mutar b'tavlin b'simin Tov Kuf Lamed Tes Sif Yud. Later on in Tov Kuf Lamed Tes, we're going to see that those people that sell tavlin, if they sell spices, the words of the Mechaber in Tov Kuf Lamed Tes Sif Yud and Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, Meichrei Tavlin, those merchants who sell spices or yarok or vegetables, the Chol Davar She'enoi Miskayim, or other food items that don't last for a long time. Paischin u'meichrim kedarkam b'farhesia. You're allowed to open up your stall and you're allowed to sell these items even b'farhesia. Why? Sha'akol yoidin shehem l'tzarech hamoed. Since these are things that don't have a long shelf life, when you're selling them, everybody understands that this is something that's being done for today, for tomorrow. So everybody understands it's l'tzarech hamoed. So too by the fish. Fish don't have a long shelf life at all. And therefore, if you're trapping fish and you're selling fish, it's clear that this is l'tzarech hamoed. Continues the Chavetz Chaim on Hey Amid Aleph. Umashma, the implication is, lefizeh, according to this, dalav dafka b'tzayda la'atzmai. This doesn't only refer to somebody who's going fishing for his personal use. Even if you have a professional fisherman who, this is his parnasa is catching fish and selling fish, gamkein mutar b'farhesia, he's also allowed to go ahead and trap fish even b'farhesia, because again, everybody will understand that this is being done l'tzarech hamoed. Now, it's a little bit funny. The words of the Chavetz Chaim here, umashma lefizeh, I'm not 100% sure what precisely he's saying is mashma like this. Certainly the svara, if the svara, why you're allowed to go fishing b'farhesia, is because it's nicker l'koil, that it's l'tzarech hamoed. So yes, I understand that svara seems to apply both to somebody who's going fishing for his personal use as well as somebody who's going fishing for professional, to do commerce. I'm going to just pause here for 1 second because once again I see I neglected to turn on my lights. That's why the picture is a little bit dark. Give me 1 second here. I knew something was wrong over there. I just couldn't put my finger on what exactly it was. Okay, that's, I think, a little bit better. Okay. So, certainly the svara, when we say the svara, that the reason you're allowed to go fishing publicly on Chol HaMoed is because it's nikkel akal, that it's l'tzarech hamoed, that svara would seem to apply equally to the private fishermen and to the commercial fishermen. But usually when the Chavetz Chaim says mashma, he's usually deriving something from the words that Arishan used or that the Mechaber used. I'm not sure what he refers to over here. Now, in Eis Katan Lamed Aleph in the Sharet Tzion, he brings this down from the Mordechai, but it's not a mashmois of the Mordechai. The Sharet Tzion himself says, V'chein mavur lehedyo b'dvarav lahama'ayin. The Mordechai seems to write beferish that it applies even to a commercial fisherman. But be that what it may, so L'chal HaPachas, the Chavetz Chaim is saying over here, and we're going to discuss this again in greater detail a little bit further in today's shir, that right now it would seem that even a commercial fisherman should be allowed to fish even before Hesyam. V'ayin ma shenichtav l'kamei, and the Chavetz Chaim says right here, take a look at what I'm going to write further on in Sif Katan Chav Gimel, sheyesh chalkin bazeh, that there are those who disagree with that. Zvuvim v'yatushim, flies and other types of insects. Imheim mitzarin ha'adam, if they are causing tsar, if they're causing distress to a person, al Chol HaMoed, mutar lahargan b'Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to kill them. You could kill mosquitoes on Chol HaMoed. Dein lechat tzarech adam gadol mizeh, because that's definitely considered a tzarech adam, if you have these insects that are driving you crazy. V'afagav dematzi lahavricham, even though you'll argue and you'll say you don't necessarily have to kill them, you could shoo them away. Says the Chavetz Chaim, we know that that doesn't work. Miyad yachseru alav, you shoo them away and they immediately come back. And therefore it's considered a tzarech adam and a tzarech hamoed to go ahead and kill them on Chol HaMoed. Now we go to the top of Hey Amud Aleph, top line in the Shulchan Aruch, Sif Hey. Kol melachos shehem l'tzarech hamoed. Whenever we're performing a malacha l'tzarech hamoed, kisha oisen oisam umanehem, if the malacha is being performed by an uman, oisen bitzina, if it's being performed by a professional, he should do it bitzina, he should do it discreetly. Ketzad, for example, hatzayadim mishal chayos va'oifos, those professional trappers, professional hunters who trap chayos and various types of wild animals, let's say deer, va'oifos, or birds, v'hatoichanin, or professional millers, v'haboitzrim limkar bashuk, or those who harvest grapes. Boitzer usually refers to grapes. That's the lashon of harvesting by grapes. V'haboitzrim limkar bashuk, those who harvest grapes, let's say, to sell them in the marketplace. Harei elu oisim bitzina l'tzarech hamoed. All of these professionals, even though the work that they're doing is l'tzarech hamoed, and they're allowed to do it on Chol HaMoed, nevertheless, they should do it bitzina. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Chaf Aleph. Kol melachos shehem l'tzarech hamoed. Ritzayin Loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say over here is, Av shebe'emes hi l'tzarech hamoed. Although this professional is certainly doing this malacha l'tzarech hamoed, we don't question the appropriateness of what he's doing. He's allowed to do what he's doing because he's doing it l'tzarech hamoed. Mikal makom, nevertheless, kisha oisen, when he does do them, the Mechaber said he should do them bitzina, he should do them discreetly. Says the Chavetz Chaim, umayri b'min malacha she'ena muchach laharaya shehi l'tzarech hamoed. And he's referring to the types of malachas where it's not really clear that it's being done l'tzarech hamoed. It's not obvious to somebody who looks, to somebody who sees this, that it's being done l'tzarech hamoed. Kigoyin hani de Messiah. For example, the types of malachas that the Mechaber himself mentioned. So, for example, you have a professional trapper, And if he's going out and he's trapping birds, it's not obvious to the one who sees what he's doing that he's doing this l'tzarech hamayid. The fellow does this trapping every day. He does it all year. And he traps birds and he prepares them and then he sells them whenever he sells them. So it's not obvious. The miller has his mill opened. He's grinding flour all year long and he grinds a lot of flour at a time. When you see the miller grinding flour on Chol HaMoed, it's certainly not muchach. It's not obvious or clear that he's doing it l'tzarech hamayid. If it's if it's a private individual, a balabas, and he's doing it on a small scale, so we're not worried that if you see a balabas using a little mill and grinding some grain into flour, we're not chayshish that you're going to think that he's doing it not l'tzarech hamayid. If you see a private individual go out to catch a bird on Chol HaMoed, we're not chayshish that you're going to think, oh, he's doing it la'achar hamayid. But when you see a professional doing it, you might think that he's doing it la'achar hamayid. He's doing it for after Yom Tov. This is his parnasa that he does all the time. Who says he's only doing it l'tzarech hamayid? V'ayli kaman siman tavkov lamed tes sif yud. This concept will be discussed in greater detail in siman tavkov lamed tes. If professionals are doing this malacha, that's when we say that a professional has to do the malacha discretely. Deba'adam prati, because when we're talking about a private individual, sha'isa la'atzmai, who's doing it for himself, einay oisa b'shir meruba. He doesn't do large quantities at a time. So again, if we see a private individual using a little mill, a hand mill, to go mill some grain into flour, we don't look at it and we're not chayshish right away, oh, what's he doing on Chol HaMoed? He must be grinding flour for after Yom Tov. No, he's grinding flour now on Chol HaMoed because he wants to make fresh challah for Yom Tov. Everybody understands that the melachah that the private individual is doing is l'tzarech hayoim, it's l'tzarech hamayid. But when you see a professional miller who's milling hundreds of pounds of flour, people are going to say he's just doing his job. He's open for business like every other day of the year. It's not obvious and clear that what he's doing is l'tzarech hamayid, and therefore we have a major marasayin problem. So a professional should do his malacha b'tzina, not b'farhesya. Ais Katan Chav Gimel, the Ramah said a very interesting thing here. The Mechaber was giving examples of professionals that have to do their malacha discreetly, and he said hatzayodim, which literally just means trappers. The Ramah interjected, and he said, shel chayos va'oifos, trappers of wild animals and fowl. The Chavetz Chaim takes note of this, and let's see what he says. Here, nice cut in Chav Gimel. Shel chayos va'oifos. The Ramah said that the Mechaber is referring to trappers of wild animals and fowl. Notes the Chavetz Chaim, HaRamah hishmit dogim. The Ramah left out fish. He wrote trappers of wild animals and fowl, but he did not say trappers of fish. The Savar, apparently the Ramah holds, the bedogim she'enon miskaimim harbe, by fish, like we said earlier in this year, fish do not have a long shelf life. They're very volatile. Afilu b'tzayod, even by a professional fisherman, yadi kule alma de l'yoyma hu tzayde. Everybody realizes that a professional fisherman, even if he's fishing for large quantities of fish on Chol HaMoed, everybody realizes that he's doing it l'tzarech hamayid, because it doesn't have a long shelf life. He's not doing it for after the moed, and it's not even like us. We have refrigerators and maybe freezers. They didn't have that. So if the professional fisherman is catching large quantities of fish on Chol HaMoed, it's still obvious that he's doing it l'tzarech hamayid, and therefore there's no need for him to do it b'tzina. He's not doing it for lacha Yom Tov. And therefore, it would be permissible for him to do this befarhesia. Like the Chavetz Chaim says, I said, and we read this earlier in this year, that when it comes to fish, a fisherman, even a professional fisherman, it would seem, is allowed to catch as much fish as he wants, and he's allowed to do it befarhesia, because everybody realizes that the melachah that he's doing is l'tzarech hamayid. Mihu. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, Kama Paiskim Cholkin Bazeh. Many Paiskim disagree with this psak, and if you look in the Sharetzion Ois Cotton Lamed Gimel, he brings this down from the Magen Avram, who says that the Rambam is mashba that way. They bring it down really from, am I quoting the right? Yeah. Yeah, so he brings this down from quite a list of individuals. Miu kama paiskim cholken bazeva osru litzaya chamalachta bekach lotzu dogim mefarhesia. Many paiskim disagree, and they say that a commercial fisherman cannot do his fishing befarhesia. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Let's say the trapper says, you know what, I don't want to do my work on Chol HaMoed. I'm going to have the minig not to go ahead and do my melachah on Chol HaMoed. Rashoin lachsar miminhagan. They are allowed to back out on that minig. We know that there's a halacha, if somebody is noyeg a minig toiv, if somebody takes on a good practice with the intent that he's always going to continue doing that, it becomes a shtikal a neder. The halacha becomes that if you want to stop that practice, you have to be mater neder. So you might think, if a trapper decides, you know what, from now on I'm not going to do trapping on Chol HaMoed, maybe he can't back away from that minig toiv unless he's mater neder. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. If the trappers take on the minig that they don't want to do trapping on Chol HaMoed, Rashayin lachsar mimin hagan, they are allowed to change their minds, and they're allowed to go back on that minig, and they're allowed to start trapping again. This is not like somebody who takes on a minig shel mitzvah, where it becomes a neder. Va'adarabba, and punkt fakert, says the Chavetz Chaim, quite the opposite. Mimatin hein b'simchas haregel. By not doing their trapping on Chol HaMoed, they're taking away simchas haregel from people, because the shelves aren't going to have the delicacies on them that they usually have. Somebody wants to go get a nice piece of chicken. He wants to get, well, chicken maybe you don't need trappers. Somebody wants to get a nice turkey. For that, sometimes you need a trapper. Somebody wants to get venison. For Yom Tov, there's no trappers. Somebody wants to get fish. According to those that say that commercial fishermen are allowed to fish even before Hesia. You'll have the fisherman who decides he doesn't want to fish on Yom Tov. Now, I can't make my gefilte fish for Yom Tov. So it's certainly not a minig shel mitzvah, and you could back out on that minig. Umavur b'Yerushalmi, and it's very clear from the Yerushalmi, that the trappers of wild animals, fowl, and fish, mutarim lotzod afilu b'mitzudais gedolos. They're allowed to do their trapping even with very large traps. So the commercial fisherman could go fishing with a huge net. He doesn't have to worry about how much he's going to catch. So that there should be plenty of simcha, plenty of happiness on the regel, because there's plenty of goods for sale. Because if you're only going to allow them to go trapping with very small, I'm not exactly sure what a chaka is, but if you're only going to allow them to trap and hunt with small devices, then they're going to trap very little, and then there's going to be less simchas Yom Tov, because there's going to be less food for sale. You're going to have less of these animals, less of these fish or fowl being sold on the market. Now, the Chavetz Chaim notes a possible exception to this. Let's say somebody has a very large fish pond, and now he wants to trap all of those fish. And you know, there's a very easy way to trap fish if you have a fish pond. Drain the fish pond. If you drain the water, now you're going to be left over with all of this fish. So, if somebody has a large fish pond, the chayfer b'tzida, and now he digs out from the banks of the fish pond, sheyazruvu hamayim, so that the water should flow out, the yotzud hadogim, and the fish will become trapped in the now empty fish pond, and they'll die. Mitzaded b'Magen Avram, the Magen Avram leads towards saying sheyesh loymar she'aser, that there's a good reason to say this is forbidden. The muchacha milsa tvei shul tzarchel. When you're mamish emptying out a fish pond and trapping all of the fish from the fish pond on Chol HaMoed, that certainly doesn't look like you're only doing this l'tzarech hamoed. It certainly looks very much like you're doing this l'tzarech chol. Venerally, but the Chavetz Chaim says it appears to him, Yesh lahakel bazer al yidei akum, you could be lenient in this if you're doing it through the agency of a non-Jew. If you do want to eat from the fish that are going to be trapped on Yom Tov, so then on Chol HaMoed you could ask a non-Jew to go dig out the banks of the fish pond and cause the fish pond to empty. Ois Katan Chav Daled, the Mechaber said, all of these professionals that do their trade on Chol HaMoed, Harei Elo Oisim B'tzina, they should do the melachah that they should do it discretely, B'tzina. And the Chavetz Chaim says, Hainu Bein Hatzeda, this refers to the trapping itself, which is the ikar melachah that they do. So the professional trapper should do his trapping B'tzina. V'hatchina, or the miller, should do his milling. He should do his grinding B'tzina. V'habetzira, and the one who's harvesting grapes should do his grape harvesting B'tzina. Ubein hamechira, and once they do have their goods, they should go sell their goods B'tzina as well. So the fisherman should sell his fish B'tzina. The trapper should sell his venison B'tzina. And the miller should sell his flour B'tzina. Okay, ancient is parla kaman Siman Taf Kuf Lamed Tesif Yod Aleph. Vayin beBir Halacha, and the Chavetz Chaim says he should take a look in the Bir Halacha. The Ramaskal Shell, the Leinian Mechiras Dogim, when it comes to selling fish, Misha Noig Lahakal Befarhesia, if a fish dealer, if a fish merchant is Noig, if he is accustomed to selling his fish Befarhesia, Ein Limchais Biyadai, you should not object to him, Diyesh Lai Amilismaich, because he certainly has who to rely on, right? We already saw that it could be that the commercial fisherman is different than the commercial trapper or the commercial miller. It could be that the commercial fisherman is even allowed to do his fishing befarhesia. Certainly the selling of his fish, that the Chavetz Chaim says, if he sells his fish befarhesia, you certainly shouldn't protest. You shouldn't be moicha because he has who to base himself on. Okay, now we close out Siman Tafkuf Lamed Gimel with the words of the Ramah, Haggah. Umutar lachloiv habehema, you're allowed to milk an animal. Afilu shaloi l'tzarech hamayid, even if you're doing this shaloi l'tzarech hamayid, you don't need the milk. The heavy davar ha'avod, because it's a davar ha'avod. It's a davar ha'avod, first of all, if you don't get the milk, if you don't milk the milk from the animal at the right time, the milk could become ruined in the animal. It could also harm the animal if you don't milk the animal. So, and there's an inyan of tzar balachayim involved as well. So you're allowed to milk an animal on Chol HaMoed, even if it's shaloi l'tzarech hamoed. Now we go to Siman Tafkuf Lamed Daled, Dinei Kibus b'Chol HaMoed. This is certainly a siman that has a lot of halacha l'maisa ramifications for us, and I'm going to go into some of the halacha l'maisa shilos that come up, but I'm not going to do that today. We'll do that a little bit later on in the siman. Let's first get a grounding in the siman. Let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says, what the Ramah says, what the Mishnah Berurah says. Then we could start to tackle the halacha l'maisa questions that often come up. Says the Shulchan Aruch here, Siman Tafkuf Lamed Daled, Dinei Kibus b'Chol HaMoed, the halachas of laundering on Chol HaMoed, Ubay Gimel Seifim, and here we have 3 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, Ein mechabsin b'moed. You're not allowed to do laundry on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to wash clothing on Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ice Cotton Aleph, Ein mechabsin b'moed. You're not allowed to launder on Chol HaMoed. Afilu l'tzarech hamoed. You're not even allowed to do this if it's l'tzarech hamoed. So, simple reading, it would seem to say, it's Chol HaMoed. You don't have a white shirt. You don't have a white shirt for today. You don't have a white shirt for Hoshana Rabbah. You don't have a white shirt for Shmini Atzeres. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're not allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed, afilu l'tzarech hamoed, even if you're doing it l'tzarech hamoed. And again, The halacha l'maisa ramifications we'll discuss a little bit later on. But right now, simple reading, this is what it says. Va'atam, and the reason for this is, says the Chavetz Chaim, a reason that we already had previously when it came to haircuts. Kedei sheyichabes me erev Yom Tov l'tzarech Yom Tov. Because make it your business to wash what you need before Yom Tov for Yom Tov. V'lo yikanis lamayid kishehu menuvel. We're afraid if somebody's going to know that he could do laundry on Chol HaMoed, so then doing laundry is not very prominent in his mind before Yom Tov. Before Yom Tov, he's making sure to put up his roast. He's making sure he has his lulav and esrog. He's making sure he has his matzah. He's getting the house ready. He's cleaning the house. He's doing the cooking. But laundry is not on his mind. And then suddenly what happens? Guess what? It's time to get dressed for Yom Tov, and he realizes he doesn't have a clean white shirt. He doesn't have a clean suit. So now he's going to go into the Yom Tov kishuhu menuvel. Let's remember, we said that there's a chiyuv of kavod v'einig on Yom Tov. You have a chiyuv. One of the chiyuvim is ksus nikia. You have to have nice, clean clothing for Yom Tov. But this fellow ignored his laundry because, it's not so prominent on his mind. And he knows he can always do laundry on Chol HaMoed. So he knows, I don't have to have 3 white shirts. I must have 1 white shirt for Yom Tov. But now it turns out that he doesn't even have 1 white shirt. So now he's going to come into the mayit kishuhu menuvel. So in order to avoid that, the same thing we did by haircuts and shaving, in order to avoid it, the Chazal said you're not allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed. Oh, now you're not allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed. Now before Yom Tov, the fellow knows he has to do whatever laundry he needs for Yom Tov. So he'll make sure that he does his laundry and he'll have nice clean clothing for Yom Tov. However, continues the Mechaber, let's continue here in Sif Aleph, Ve'elu shemachabsin. However, the following people are allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed. Haba memedinas hayam, somebody who came from overseas right before Yom Tov, and he didn't have time to do laundry. V'hayoytzi mi beis hashivyo mi beis hasurin, or somebody who got out of captivity right before Yom Tov, or he got out of prison right before Yom Tov. So he didn't have time to do laundry. He's an oinus, like the halacha that we said by the haircut and the shave. If you got out of captivity on Erev Yom Tov right before Yom Tov, you didn't have time to take a haircut. It's not your fault that you didn't take a haircut. You're an honest. So then on Chol HaMoed, then you can. Same thing with laundry. If you had one of these oinsim that you weren't able to do laundry before Yom Tov, not any oinus under the sun. Same thing by haircuts. It has to be the oinsim that are listed over here, which are well-known oinsim. Them mefarsim and milsa. People know you just got out of jail. So if they see you doing laundry, they understand you couldn't do laundry before Yom Tov. So if you have one of these oinsim, you're a ba medinas hayam, yoytzi mi beis hashivi, mi beis hasurin, u'menudeh, she'etiru loy chachamim baregel, or if somebody was in cherem, Bezdin put somebody in cherem, and now it was only on Yom Tov that they released him from cherem. While he was in cherem, he's not allowed to do laundry. He has the din of an oval, the din of a mourner. He's not allowed to do laundry. But now, on Chol HaMoed, they released him from his nidui, they released him from his cherem, now he's allowed to do laundry. Or let's say you have somebody who made a neder that he's not going to do laundry. V'nishal baregel, and he was shoyel neder on these, he did like a taras dedarim on Yom Tov, v'yitirulai, and they were matir him, they were matir his neder, so now he could do laundry again. So okay, he could do laundry on Chol HaMoed because he's an oinus. He wasn't able to do laundry before Yom Tov. So all of these individuals are allowed to do laundry. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah is cut and base. Ve'elu shemechabsin, these are the individuals that are allowed to do laundry. Haba memedinas hayam, says the Chavetz Chaim, ayin le'el b'simen taf kuf lamed aleph siv gimel v'dalet. Look earlier in Siman taf kuf lamed aleph where we discussed the halachas of haircuts and a shave. V'chol hadvarim shemavur sham bifnim uve Mishnah Berurah in giluach, everything that we learned in the Mechaber and in the Ramah and in the Mishnah Berurah when it came to haircuts, shaykh gam be'inyoneinu le'inyan kibus. They apply over here by laundering as well. So all of these halachas that we had, exactly who and when does this apply? It's only these einsim, and it's only because it's well known. And we're talking about somebody who came right away before Yom Tov. He mamish didn't have time. So all of these halachas that we learned over here in Tav Kuf Lamed Aleph, they apply to the person who wants to do laundry as well. Ice cotton gimel umenuda sheitiru. Somebody who was in cherem and they released him from cherem. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, while he was in cherem he couldn't do laundry. The menuda aser b'kibus, because he's not allowed to do laundry like an oval. Now let's continue in the Shulchan Aruch. Bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch. So we said certain individuals who are allowed to do laundry. Now there are certain items that anybody is allowed to wash on Chol HaMoed. Mitbechais hayadayim, hand towels, like the Mishnah Berurah says, hand towels. Even if you wash your hand towel before Yom Tov, you're going to have to wash again on Chol HaMoed because they're constantly getting dirty. You constantly need fresh ones. So therefore, you can't wash them before Yom Tov and have enough for the whole Yom Tov. And it's understood that this is something that you always need more of. So that you could launder on Chol HaMoed. Mitbechais hasaparim, also the cape of a barber that gets hairy, that has to be washed constantly, so you could wash that on Chol HaMoed. Now you might think, what do you need the cape of a barber for? You're not allowed to give a haircut on Chol HaMoed. The answer is because we learned that there are individuals who are allowed to take a haircut on Chol HaMoed. Mitbechais hasfag, or bath towels, bigdei ktanim, or the clothing of young children. All of these may be washed on Chol HaMoed under certain circumstances. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah over here. Ice cotton dalid. Mitbechais hayadayim. Hand towels could be washed on Chol HaMoed. Hatam, the reason is, shadarkan lehislach lech tekif, because they become dirty very, very quickly. Vim kain, and if so, afilu im hayam mechabsa me'erev Yom Tov, even if you wash your hand towels on erev Yom Tov, hayu chayzun u'maslach lechid, they would get dirty right away on Yom Tov. You're going to wash them before Yom Tov. You put a nice, beautiful, fresh hand towel out at the beginning of Yom Tov. You come home from shul, you go to the Suda, you wash, and 10, 15 people use the hand towel. It's dirty again. So even if you wash them before, they're going to get dirty again, and you're going to have to wash them on Chol HaMoed. And therefore, even if you have plenty of them, you're allowed to wash them on Chol HaMoed, because every day you need a new one. However, the Chavetz Chaim says, according to what we are noyig nowadays in the times of the Chavetz Chaim, Shamachlifin rak mi Shabbos l'Shabbos, that they would change the hand towel only once a week on Erev Shabbos. Alkein afilu yesh rak shnayim. In that case, even if you only have 2 hand towels, ein lechabsan b'Chol HaMoed, you're not allowed to wash it on Chol HaMoed because you have enough for the whole Yom Tov. Shadai lehem b'kvisa shebei erev Yom Tov. If the minig is to only change it once a week, so if you have 2 hand towels and you wash them before Yom Tov, you're covered for the whole Yom Tov. In that case, there's no heter for you to wash it on Chol HaMoed. Shadai lehem b'kvisa shebei erev Yom Tov. Kasav achayodam du adin patzelka shel chaytim. Look at that, I just used a tissue for my nose. So too, a handkerchief, dinoi kimit b'chais hayadayim, you're allowed to wash them on Chol HaMoed the same way you're allowed to wash a hand towel. Ois cotton hay, hasaparim, the cape of a barber, hainu sapariyim, shenoistem habit pachais aleim kishem istaprin. This is either the cape that goes on the one who's getting the haircut or the shmata that goes on the barber when he's giving the haircut because he gets all hairy. This the mishfarshi svarim mamishtar. Some who have the girsa not saparim but svarim. Hainu sifrei kodesh, the covers of sifrei kodesh. And the rationale why it's mutter to wash these things is the same thing as the hand towel, because washing them before Yom Tov does not negate the need to wash them on Yom Tov, because they're constantly getting dirty and you constantly need fresh ones. So in that case, you're allowed to wash it on Chol HaMoed as well. Ois cotton vav hasvog mitbechais hasvog hainu mashe mistafkin behem kishe yotzim libeis hamerchotz. This is a bath towel. The Kasa Beis Yosef b'shem kol by da'achshav nagu b'zeh chumra. In that the Beis Yosef says that in those days they were machmar on bath towels. V'chein royal lasos v'ayin beli rabba. We'll discuss that more as we go along. Ois cotton zayin ubigdei ketanim. We turn the page to Hey Amid Beis. The clothing of little children. Also you could wash on Chol HaMoed. Ki derech haktanim lehislach leich b'titu b'tzaya tadir. Because little kids are always getting dirty. If they're toddlers, they're getting dirty in the mud. If they're babies, they're getting dirty from excrement. So again, washing their clothing on Erev Yom Tov doesn't negate the need to wash them on Yom Tov. And therefore, the whole takana, why you let's remember, I didn't mention this at the outset, let's remember that technically speaking, really washing clothing, laundering on Chol HaMoed should be mutter. What is it? It's melachah that you're doing Chol HaMoed. It's a tzarech adam. It's a need of a person. It's not a ma'aseh umun. It's not something that takes a professional to do. So really it should be mutter. The only reason it's usher is because of this takana. We want to make sure that you do your laundering before Yom Tov. So in order to make sure you're going to do your laundering before Yom Tov, we ask you to do it on Chol HaMoed. But these are things that you're going to have to wash on Chol HaMoed anyway, even if you wash them before Yom Tov. So the takana doesn't apply. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, here on the top line of HaMoed Beis, right by the Ois Kat and Ches, for the Mishnah Berurah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should stay in Gans Klal Yisrael in good stead. The Rabban Shem should be Megan and Gans Klal Yisrael b'chol makom shehem. The Rabban Shem should send Yeshuas and Refuas to everyone. We should especially have in mind Yisrael ben Achim ben Ita Kinendel, Mendel Shmuel ben Miriam Leah, Yitzchak ben Chana Rachel, Menachem Aryeh ben Dina Yehudis. Somebody else is not coming to me. Nope. The Rabban Shem should send a Refuah Shalom L'chol Chol Yisrael b'chol makom shehem. Be well.